President Bongbong Marcos has reorganized the National Security Council at a time of discord on the levels of national politics and external defense. According to Executive Order 81, signed on December 30 but only released today, January 3rd, the NSC's restructuring is meant to guarantee that it remains a resilient national security institution. The EO says changes in the composition of the advisory body will, quote, ensure that council members uphold and protect national security and sovereignty.
The council will now have it on its executive committee, President Marcos and his executive secretary, the Senate President, and the House Speaker or their representatives, the National Security Advisor, and the Secretaries of Foreign Affairs, Justice, National Defense, and DILG. Most members of the council enumerated in the 2001 EO will remain, except for 3 deputies that can be designated by the Speaker versus the previously mandated deputy speakers for Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao.
EO 81, though, has clearly removed Vice President Sara Duterte from the National Security Council. Her father, Rodrigo Duterte, Joseph Estrada, and Gloria Macapagal Arroyo will also no longer be part of the council as former presidents. Executive Secretary Lucas Bersamin explains that at the moment, the VP is not considered relevant to the responsibilities of membership in the NSC. He adds that when the need arises, President Marcos has the power to add members or advisors to the council. Only when necessary, the chiefs of the National Intelligence Coordinating Agency, the Armed Forces, the Philippine National Police, and the National Bureau of Investigation, and the Bangko Sentral will also be allowed to attend NSC meetings.
What a way to end the first week of January with an executive order that will surely be talked about in the next several days. Let's start the conversation with geopolitical analyst Richard Heydarian, who joins the big story tonight via Zoom. Welcome back to the show. Richard, okay, the NSC is an advisory body to the president. So he has full prerogative over who he wants to be in that body. Am I correct with that assertion? And what do you make of the first EO of the president in 2025?
Well, obviously, the president has started the year with a bang, and I think you're absolutely correct. We're going to discuss the implications of this for quite some time. Some would say perhaps this is a belated move. As we know, Sara Duterte used to be the head of the NTF-ELCAC. This is the person who wanted to be the Department of National Defense secretary at some point in time. This was a person who was the officer in charge when BBM was abroad. And we saw over the years, unti-unti, nawawala siya, particularly last year. Essentially, she lost all of those positions. But it was still a big wonder why she and her father were part of the National Security Council in light of 2 important things. So kung titignan natin yung statements na lumabas, there was a mention of essentially additional guarantee. I think you can read in between the lines, perhaps all of the assassination threats perhaps may have to do something with that. But more importantly, the other thing you can hear from the National Security Council is also this implication. Now, we have to have alignment in terms of understanding what is our national sovereignty and national interest. So at once, I think if you read in between the lines, what is being said here is that the Dutertes are not trusted by this administration, in terms of whether they share its outlook on our national security. I think this has to do with the fact that the Dutertes are very close to China. And Sara Duterte has been saying a lot of things about a lot of conflicts around the world, has been conspicuously quiet on the West Philippine Sea issue. So that's one. But the other one is, of course, this implication that they're not trusted. So you can see this as a kind of a not so subtle purge of the Dutertes from one of the most important organs of the state, because the National Security Council, led by former DILG Secretary and Military Chief General Anyo, has been really at the forefront of making sure that this administration doesn't face any serious security challenges at home, and more importantly, coordinates our position on the West Philippine Sea and how we deal with China.
But Richard, I understand that it actually makes sense given the events in the last how many months. It makes sense for them to be removed, right? The association with China, the mistrust, and yung hidwaan, and that big breakup within the unity.
And the active threat too.
The active threat too. But on the other hand, politically speaking, how does this set the tone for the rest of the year, given also everything, the impeachment trial, the elections?
Well, I mean, it remains to be seen if this is the beginning of a new chapter of direct confrontation. Because, to be honest, I've been on the record saying that it looks like there's tremendous amount of sometimes diffidence on the part of President Marcos Jr. to really take on the Dutertes, considering what they have laid out in terms of direct questioning of his mandate. I mean, you had no less than former President Duterte on multiple occasions, essentially almost agitating the military to do something. You have people close to him, like former presidential, the spokesman, Panelo, implying that, there could be some urge to create security destabilization. I mean, you are seeing all sorts of agitations for separation of Mindanao. So, to be honest, I see this as quite 1 year late. But nevertheless, with elections just around the corner, with conversations over impeachment set to take precedence once again, and with all of other kinds of legal cases that could be filed against Sara Duterte and her father on multiple fronts, perhaps this is the opening salvo in a new chapter of confrontation between the two sides. But honestly, I'm always very cautious not to overread into things, because we have a really, I won't say notorious, but we have quite a conflict avoidant president. So is this a purge that is the beginning of a new chapter, or is this just cleaning up the house and making sure that the Dutertes are kept at a healthy distance from sensitive national security conversations? Because obviously there are a lot of people inside the government who are not comfortable talking about China, West Philippine Sea, and national security issues if one or two Dutertes, in this case two Dutertes, would be around the corner.
Well, Richard, back in November 25, we were talking about it. Nagkaroon ng parang banter si Vice President Duterte pati si General Anyo. Tinanong niya kay General Anyo, bakit hindi ako inaimbitahan sa kahit anong NSC meeting? She even requested for a notarized minutes of the meeting to be able to review the accomplishments of NSC. Would this be the response to that? And taking a look at the EO of President Arroyo, she fixed the composition of the National Security Council. What would be the rationale in including past presidents and also the vice president in that body?
I mean, great question. I mean, this just tells you what kind of unprecedented situation we're finding ourselves in, because historically, presidents invite ex-presidents because of their experience, because of the privileged information they may have, and of course, because they may still have residual influence, including on international affairs. So people like, for instance, former President Fidel Ramos, who was considered as a great global statesman. His advice, his counsel was always appreciated by multiple administrations throughout the years. And you saw with also former President Arroyo, despite the fact that she may have had, to put it mildly, complicated relationship, whether it's Estrada, whether it's Ramos. Time and again, we saw different presidents, Pinoy, even Duterte himself, bringing his predecessors, because you want to, collate. You want to bring the elder statesmen. You want to bring their wisdom and experience. And at the same time, you want to make sure all major figures are aligned when it comes to their national interests. But now we are in a situation whereby the former president and the current vice president, both of them from the Duterte family, in one way or another, are not only contradicting the position of the government, but at some points you could say even threatening the government, or some would even accuse them of actually towing the line of our rival in the West Philippine Sea. So we are in an unprecedented situation, and hence we are seeing this major reshuffling by the government.
Do you think it has anything to do with, this is slightly more boring than what we were just talking about, but do you think it has anything to do with our shift from internal defense to territorial defense, guarding against potential infringers on our territory and our EEZ?
Oh, actually, I had to also answer to Grace. Great question, too. And I think perhaps the reason they also had to remove them is that we don't trust sharing with you the minutes of our conversation. I think that was a very subtle way. I had to say that, right? Like, oh, you're demanding for the minutes. Oh, I think we don't want to share that with you. That's a very not so subtle way of saying we don't trust you guys. And who knows, maybe the minutes, next thing you know, ends up in Zhongnanhai. These people were Zhongnanhai. So I'm just saying, it's a not so subtle way of saying we don't want to share you the information. We don't feel comfortable with you having access to the key and important discussion we have, because the National Security Council coordinates all of our important domestic and international security policies. Now, on the question by Sean, Yeah, I mean, we are in the midst of a massive transition in our national security strategy in the sense that hindi lang Mindanao yung focus natin, hindi lang NPA and domestic insurgencies. We are at the very forefront of an emerging new Cold War. In few days, Donald Trump is going to take over the White House. In weeks from now, you're going to have the Trump administration knocking at the door and perhaps pushing the Philippines to be much more at the forefront of holding the line, whether in the West Philippine Sea or on even the Taiwan question. So if you're the National Security Council with Trump coming in with the new Cold War expected to intensify, then maybe the last thing you want is to share the minutes of your very sensitive discussions with the U.S. with a certain dynasty or family which is suspected of having a little bit of overindulgent sympathy towards China, which is on the other side of the fence as far as this new Cold War is concerned. So yeah, I think it also has to do with the fact that it's not only a new year, things are going to get hotter when it comes to the U.S.-China competition, and things are going to get hotter in terms of Philippine-U.S. security cooperation as a more hawkish Donald Trump administration takes over.
Well, Richard, E.S. Bersamin did say that the reason behind this reorganization was really to streamline the membership of the NSC. He actually even added that sa ngayon, they don't see the relevance of the Vice President when it comes to the responsibilities in the NSC. What do you make of that in terms of the relevance of VP Sara in that? And how do you think her perceived non-critical stance on China came at play in this reorganization?
I mean, this is where you would have. I mean, BBM really needs someone like either Bongo to what Duterte was, or he needs someone like his own version of Ronald Llamas, because I think the people we have in Malacanang are sometimes even nicer than BBM. When in fact you need someone to be the attack person, right? So I think this was. I don't know if I want to put it as it was like a polite gloss on a more or less purge of the Dutertes from the national security organs of the state. I mean, I think this is where you can see also the communication problem with this administration. They need someone in Malacanang who can go out there and spell it out and say, we don't trust the Dutertes. You're not welcome here. We think you could be a national security threat. You already made threats against the president, the first family, and the Speaker of the House. For some reason, BBM doesn't have that person. So I don't know if Ronald Llamas or someone like that is available for Malacanang to hire. But that's, I think, one of the interesting gaps that we have seen with the BBM administration. They don't have an attack dog. They don't have a kind of pugnacious, aggressive kind of spokesman or someone in the Malacanang who will say things that have to be said. But BBM, for some reason, is not personally in position to say that. So yun yung kulang sa atin.
You don't think
yung
it's
kulang
the
nakikita
Congress?
natin sa Malacanang nowadays.
And to add to Sean's question, actually, we might not have a front-facing, strong figure, but the president is also giving the House Speaker more power here by allowing him to appoint 3 deputy speakers to the NSC. So does that speak, that the president and the House Speaker are totally aligned in the past decisions? Because, we've always been questioning if this is what the president wants, if what the House Speaker decides on is also what the president wants. I mean, this first EO in 2025, are they drawing the line on the sand that this is, House Marcos and the House Speaker is with us?
Absolutely. Another very important question, because I think if you look at the rumor mills, you look at I think hindi lang Marites to, there have been some discussions that maybe the Speaker of the House position is no longer assured. There have been even rumors that, the Sara camp was supposedly or allegedly asking BBM, that as part of a ceasefire, perhaps the Speaker of the House should be changed. There have been even rumors of hidwaan sa loob daw ng kabinete. Some of the big figures within the cabinet supposedly have had some disagreements on the state of affairs. So this is closing in the ranks. This is a way this is a very clear way with President Marcos Jr. saying that I stand with my cousin. I trust the Speaker of the House, and that the House is very much part and parcel and a core element of our national security. In fact, I do not remember too many speakers of the House in the past who, for instance, visited Pag-asa or who were so vocal on national security or West Philippine Sea related issues. So I think this was a vote of confidence, absolutely, in the Speaker of the House, and also perhaps a way also to dispel those rumors that maybe Speaker Romualdez position is not as secure as before. So clearly, he's still in many ways the right hand or the left hand man of the president.
Okay, speaking of national security, that underwater drone that they recovered off the waters of Masbate, that was on December 30. What do you make of all that?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, the concerns about intrusions by China or by hostile elements, whether it's drones, whether it's missiles falling off in our waters, whether it's submarine movements, this has been going on for quite some time. I think the fundamental challenge for the Philippines at this point in time is to improve more than anything else its domain awareness, the ability to know what on earth is happening within our waters, so that we can deter. And we can tell others, do not mess around, do not put drones or do not put fishy stuff within our waters. And at the same time, perhaps at some point, we have to develop certain capabilities to, I won't say shut down, but to deny access. You can shut down the GPS. You can use electronics, warfare technologies, among other things. So I think those things will be very important. So obviously, China is flexing its muscle. China is saying that it has preponderance of force in the West Philippine Sea. And I think this is a wake-up call for the Philippines. So all of these are related, right? Because if you look at the statement of the National Security Council, it talks about both domestic and international. So I would say for the very first time, the domestic politics in the Philippines and the evolving international environment are very much tied. As I said, the Philippines is confronting a two-level or double-deck Cold War, right? U.S.-China, Duterte-Marcos. And this reshuffling within the National Security Council is a direct response to that two-level challenge that the Philippines is facing right now.